Wonderful. We will get started in just a moment. I want to make sure we have time for people to join on tonight. And before we introduce our two really special guests for celebrating this wonderful and important book, Dear Black Girls, Letters from Your Sisters on Stepping into Your Power. So tonight we have Tamara Winfrey Harris, the author of Dear Black Girl, who is a writer who specializes in the ever-evolving space where current events, politics, and pop culture intersect with race and gender. And Tamara's first book, The Sisters Are All Right, Changing the Broken Narrative of Black Women in America, was published in 2015. This is her first book since that publication. And you may have also encountered her writing in the New York Times, the Atlantic, the LA Times, and many more publications. Tamara is also the co-founder of Centering Sisters, LLC, an organization that unapologetically addresses the needs and issues of Black women, girls, and femmes. And tonight, Tamara will be joined by a contributor in the book, Dear Black Girl, Dr. Carolyn Strong. And Dr. Strong is a motivational educator with an anti-bullying message of hope for children, families, and schools. And with more than 15 years of educating experience, she is currently the Dean of Students in a high school serving more than 1,200 young people. And Dr. Strong holds multiple master's degrees in curriculum and educational leadership and a doctoral degree in curriculum and social inquiry. Dr. Strong is also the author of Black Girl Blues, Small Group Sessions, Activities, and Discussions to Combat Interracial Bullying, a book that has been utilized as an alternative to suspensions in schools across the US. And Dr. Strong is one of the other co-founders of Centering Sisters, LLC, along with Tamara Winfrey Harris. So I would love to hear more about the both of you, and I'll hand it off so that we can hear a little bit more about the book tonight. Welcome, Tamara and Dr. Strong.
Thank you. Hey, friend.
Hey, you. Hey, you.
So one brief introduction does not cover all your fabulousness. Was there anything that was missed?
I mean, I'm a great dancer, but we'll table that for when outside opens. And I promised myself I would be good today. So, I mean, I promise that every week, but today is the day. Eventually, there has to be a day that is the day. And I have decided that it is today. So with that being said, I feel like I haven't talked to you in forever. So what's going on, girl?
Well, what's going on is I think we should start this conversation by reading a little bit of the preface, because I think it kind of provides a little bit of context for the book, and then we can get talking. So the preface is called We Are All Right. And it kind of points back to my first book, The Sisters Are All Right, and the idea that Black women and Black girls are intrinsically valuable and human. And so the preface says, my Black girls, you tell me things. You tell me how you love your mamas, but kind of hate them too. You tell me about the boys at school who text dirty messages. You tell me about beauty insecurities, 2 big noses and 5 heads. You tell me who you like, showing me pictures of boys on IG and giggling. Ain't he cute? You tell me these things and I smile. It's been a while since I was a girl, but I remember hating my parents' rules and being insecure about my looks. I remember the trifling boys and super fine crushes. Some things about Black girlhood never change. But you tell me other things too. You tell me about anxiety or depression that will not let go. You tell me about social media memes that leave you feeling demeaned and hated. You tell me about boys and men who violate you and families who cannot deal with the devastation of sexual assault. You tell me about carrying the burden of friends and family who have been murdered. You tell me about families who cannot accept your queer identity. You tell me about schools that suspend you for petty reasons. You tell me how people assume you are angry, unfeminine, grown, and hypersexual before you can even find out who you are for yourself. You tell me these things and I worry. I remember that the world does not value Black girls like it should. Some things that are too common in Black girlhood must change. And I know you agree with me, Dr. Strong.
I mean, yes. And it's funny because I've read the preface, I've read it in many incarnations, and I've read it in the book, hence the many incarnations. But every time I hear it, it still resonates. And I know that I am not the only person that feels that way. And I think for me that part of the reason it resonates is because I feel like every time I hear it, something else has happened to a Black girl. So it's just last time when I was hearing it, I was thinking of one other incident. And now that I'm hearing it this week, I'm thinking of yet something else and yet another way that Black girls have been shown that no one gives a damn. So it's hard for me to hear it and not bring those things to the forefront. And having said that, I guess the question becomes, as a writer, how do you decide where to stop? Because I know when I was writing my dissertation, the thing everybody kept yelling at me about was eventually you gotta.
Well, I felt like with this book that the focus was on, like, the sisters are all right, spent a lot of time talking about, you know, all of the negative stereotypes about us and what that does to our lives. And in this book, I felt like the main focus was grace, because, you know, we have seen recently Black girls don't get a lot of grace. We saw, you know, we recently had a George Floyd verdict. And the only reason that we have evidence of what happened to that man and his murder is because a 17-year-old Black girl stood there and videotaped it. And in the aftermath, I remember in the direct aftermath, how little grace she got. You know, people were saying, well, why didn't you do anything? You should have intervened. Why would you stand there and film it as if she weren't a child? And there was so little concern and so little discussion about her trauma, what must have been the trauma of a child seeing something like that. And, you know, now we have the case of Ma'Khia Bryant. And even though the details of what happened in that moment are still coming out, what I do notice is that people have a whole lot of grace for the police officer and what he must have thought and what he must have been feeling and mistakes and all those, but not a lot of grace for Ma'Khia Bryant, who again was a child. And so, you know, with Dear Black Girl, I wanted Black women particularly to talk to girls with vulnerability and kindness, to show what it looks like when we give each other grace. Because as you'll hear later when I read the epilogue, I feel like that's something that's critical for Black femmes, Black women, Black girls to do, because we get so little grace otherwise.
Absolutely. I think that even in that for me, one of the things, if we can sit with Ma'Khia Bryant for just a second, one of the things that struck me that was so egregious in that situation was just how quickly and readily she was adultified. And the girl who, again, the jury is still out. There's some people saying she's 15. There are some people saying she's 16. So there's some stuff going on there, but either way it goes, 15 or 16, she's still a child. And everybody was so quick to young woman her, or woman her. Well, a 16-year-old woman was killed. Where is a 16-year-old woman? But that was some of the language that was coming out. And one of the things that I've thought regarding Dear Black Girl is that even in the title, it seeks to be the antithesis of adultification of our girls, and allowing them the grace to be children that society doesn't often give them.
Good, because that's what I hoped. I wanted to talk to Black girls as girls, and we both know, some of the listeners may not know about the Georgetown study that was done. Was it 2 years ago, maybe? But
Maybe a little longer than that now.
2 or 3 years
2 or 3,
ago,
yeah.
The Georgetown study showed that Black girls are thought to be more adult than other girls, thought to have more adult knowledge, thought to need less support,
As
thought
early
to
as
be more
5.
independent. Yep, more knowledge of things, including sex, as early as, especially between the ages of 5 and 12. And so so if anyone is listening and they're like, wow, they came in hot, they're talking about like really difficult issues. You know, one of the things that I wanted to do with this book, in this book, you'll hear letters from, women about their biracial experience, about loving their skin, about their family relationships, about, work and their hobbies. But I also wanted to make sure that to include difficult things, places where Black girls, we know, are overrepresented and where disparities exist. So, we know that 60% of Black girls will experience sexual assault before they are 18. We know that Black girls are the fastest growing group in the juvenile justice system. We know about the adultification of Black girls. And so, there are letters from Black women about a bunch of things, but I didn't want to pass up those really difficult things, because the things that Carolyn is talking about, it's the reality for too many Black girls.
So I do have a question, even regarding that, because I guess my question would be, what do you say to the people who say, why is that your responsibility to have those conversations? That's what parents are for.
I wish more parents were having some of these conversations. I wish that every girl had a Black woman in her life that would speak joy and light into her. Unfortunately, every Black girl doesn't have that. And as a matter of fact, as I've traveled around and spoken to Black girls, one of the things I hear a lot is that, some of them say that the very people who are reinforcing negative stereotypes about them are sometimes Black women, are sometimes people who look like them. So it's a grandmother who tells them to stay out of the sun because their skin is too dark. And it's an auntie that warns them about being fast. And, it's a Black woman school counselor that, says they have an attitude problem. Because the reality is, and this, we grow up, we have those same little Black girls inside of us, and we grew up hearing all of those same things, all of those negative stereotypes. And so it takes a lot to deprogram yourself enough not to pass those things along to younger generations. And I hope this book will model how we do that.
If only there was a resource to help those that may want to have those conversations, but can't get out of their own way to do so.
Well, in addition to Dear Black Girl, if you go to my website, TamaraWinfreyHarris.com, there's actually a free reader experience kit. And in it are some additional questions. So what I hope will happen is that moms will read this book with their daughters, and aunts will read this book with, their nieces, and caregivers will read this book with girls. Girls groups will use it. So there are additional questions to help have good intergenerational conversations around these issues. And I also spoke with a psychologist and an educator. That would be my dear friend, Dr. Carolyn Strong, and my other dear friend, Dr. Tiffany Dent, for some hints on how to have good intergenerational conversation. Because, there's a power imbalance there when you're mom and you're talking to daughter. There are also some really cute paper dolls and a playlist created by a 17-year-old Black girl.
So going back to the reader experience kit, because it's one of my favorite things ever. How do you think, because again, educator, how do you think that reader experience kit can translate into small group school-based settings?
Well, how do you think it would translate, educator Dr. Carolyn Strong, who contributed?
I mean, I think that I think the reader experience kit personally works with any small group, as long as the person that is facilitating is doing so in reflection and fidelity. The thing that you have to keep up front about this book in general is that it's for you, but it's not about you. In the sense that as a Black woman, I feel like this book is for me. But when I am sitting with Black girls, it's not about me. So what I have to do, or what any adult has to learn to do when they're working with kids, is to get out of their own way. And I think that that's why the reader experience kit was so important, because when you're dealing with these topics, like you said, a lot of us are still mitigating our own trauma to the point that we can get in our own way, and they can say, yeah, I know what this letter says, but let me tell you what had happened to me. And so what we end up with is a vicious cycle where you have this well-written letter where someone has bared their soul to talk to this girl about their own trauma around, like you mentioned earlier, sexual assault. And now you've got auntie over here just telling you that what you only had to do to prevent this was. And that, I think, and again, I can't speak for you, but I think as a contributor, that was the point of adding the reader experience kit, so that we could get some folks to hush and heal.
Yeah, so one of the things I should say that I asked women to do when I asked for letters, that I asked that they be feminist, that they be anti-racist, that they be LGBTQ positive, that they be anti-respectability politics. I asked that people not make assumptions about class or religion, because I really felt that it was important. I want Black girls to see themselves in this book in all the ways they show up in the world. And I don't want anyone to feel shamed. You know, we know there are a lot of girls that are left out of the narrative, you know, when we talk about Black girls. I don't want anyone to pick up this book and say, oh, well, this is just for girls who aren't biracial. This is just for girls who aren't trans. This is just for girls that grew up with their biological parents. No, I want the range of girls to see themselves in these letters. And speaking of letters, would you, Dr. Carolyn Strong, perchance read your lovely letter? Because I love it, and it speaks to an important issue, which is colorism.
Just over here assuming I'm literate. All right, let's go. Dear brown-skinned Black girl, if no one else tells you this today, hear it from me. You and your dark chocolate shell are beautifully and wonderfully made. As a young girl growing up with chocolate skin and 4C hair, the tightest of kinks and curls, I didn't see anyone on television that looked like me. And if somehow a girl like me did make it to the screen, she usually was being made fun of. That made me feel like I was not beautiful. And I've spent the last 35 years trying to turn that feeling around. I'm going to do my best right now to tell you the things I wish that someone had told me back then. Read this as often as you need to be okay. They hate you because they ain't you. Look around, love. People who don't have what you have and don't look how you look are paying big bucks to get what the creator bestowed upon you for free. The next time you see a girl on IG tan to death with lip fillers, butt implants, and box braids, just remember, yours is free and organic. We are slowly, ever so slowly, moving toward a world that sees the beauty in you, in us. And as I write this, Miss Universe, Miss America, Miss USA, and Miss Teen USA are all beautiful, vibrant Black women of varying hues and hair textures. They are a visual representation of all the ways that Black girls can be and are physically beautiful. In the meantime, know that the absence of dark-skinned girls in mainstream culture says more about the people making the culture than it says about you. As a girl, I remember thinking, what's wrong with me? I had a ton of answers, and each one made me feel worse than the one before it. I don't want that for you. Bump that. Your melanin, the thing that controls how brown you are, is an asset. People may give you crap about it and may not appreciate it now. But know this, honey, the saying black don't crack is real, and melanin is the best anti-aging cream you could ever ask for. Beautiful black girl, if you let it, this world will take your soul and try to convince you that you handed it over willingly. It is my job as a fellow black girl to stop that from happening. I start by telling you you are beautiful. The creator makes no mistakes, but also know that in your beauty lies the ability to do and be anything you want. And if nothing else, know that this chocolate girl loves you.
I love that. I love that letter so much.
Thank
Why did you
you.
choose? And I remember I gave you a bunch of options of
You
what to
did.
write about. Why did you choose that?
Um, for a couple of reasons. And I think that for me, um, being kind of in the throes of my dissertation when the ask came out, that's kind of where I was in terms of doing all this research. And I was knee deep in research that was telling me that even in schools that were a monolith where all of the students were black, if you were to break down the data, there was still colorism in showing that darker skinned students were being suspended more than the lighter skinned students. And even in research and referrals, that darker skinned kids were getting more referrals because they were often esoterically viewed to be more dangerous and more of a threat, and how lighter skinned kids are often given more of the benefit of the doubt. So, in addition to just how I felt as a child growing up and never seeing myself reflected back at me positively, and being that child who wasn't allowed to play in the sun, because I was dark enough already. Direct quote, love my mama, but direct quote, not being allowed to play in the sun, and everybody's running around and they're outside and it's the heat of summer and I'm in the house because there was just no way that she was going to allow me to get any darker. Because it wasn't, and this was always the crazy part about it, it was never coming from a place of malice. She really thought she was helping me. She really was like, life is already going to be hard enough for you as a black girl, and now you want to get outside and get darker. No, 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 no. Stay your little self right in here in this house, and don't let the sun touch you. So it wasn't until I got older and I started to realize that that was not my issue and that was not my cross to bear. That was systemic, and the only way to break that system was to overload it with something else. So that was why that was the letter I wanted to write, because I know there's some child somewhere looking at a tube of skin lightener going, I wonder, like, if this little tube is supposed to do with these little spots, what will it do if I, you know,
All over.
if I take it to the head? Like, what will happen? And so that was what I wanted to try and mitigate. And I am grateful even for the fact that 2021 is nowhere near like what 1900 and I'm old and I'll stop there was like. So we've definitely moved beyond Rudy and Vanessa Huxtable, because those were literally the only two dark skinned girls on TV when I was growing up. And they both had so much long hair that even in that I was still like, yeah, well, kind of. So
You know what I think you touched on something important, and that is, I think sometimes in the things that we say to Black girls as Black women, it's out of fear and
Yeah.
working for them, because we know, as I said at the beginning of the conversation, Black girls don't get a lot of grace. We know that they're judged harshly. We know they don't get a lot of room to make mistakes. And so, we can unwittingly end up reinforcing society's negativity and saying things like, well, you don't need to get any darker because it's going to be hard enough for you. And so, one of the things that we have to learn to do is move with love and vulnerability instead of letting that fear take over.
You have to. But the other part about it is that that's so hard to do when we're opening up a show or an event talking about a 15-year-old that lost her life for something that happens. And I think that that's why even all these years later, the fear of the elders is still so strong, because it's not necessarily the consequences, the stakes aren't necessarily any less high, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like back in the day, they were like, no, you need to make sure you get yourself together because you may not make it out of this alive.
Right.
And that's why everything was so heightened. But now I'm still like, no, you need to get yourself together because you might not make it out of this alive.
Yeah.
But how do we mitigate that? And this is my question for you. And I think you're on the right track in even writing this book in the first place. How do we mitigate that and still keep people safe?
That's so hard. I just think that, always having to bend yourself and hide yourself is not freedom. It really isn't. And so if we think we're keeping our daughters and girls safe, by encouraging them to be narrowed versions of themselves, and that's going to keep them safe, one, it's not going to work. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
You cannot code switch enough. You cannot be respectable enough in order to outrun racism and sexism as a Black woman or a Black girl. You just can't. And so why don't we teach our daughters to be free and to be their authentic selves and to love themselves? And then if we want to work on something, if we want to scold anything, if we want to call anything bad, then call the system bad and work on changing that.
T-shirt. I love a good T-shirt. And I don't have my pen. I can't write that down. That's going on the next T-shirt after I get Hush and Heal.
One of the things that the book does, I just wanted to point out, because I was looking like in the chapter with your letter, is there are these sections called Know This that add some additional context to some of the letters. Because some of the letters talk about things that might be broad, like colorism or Black name bias. Or some of the letters mention the names of like really cool people that girls may not know yet, and they may want to learn more. Also, in some of the chapters that have some difficult letters, like about sexual assault or mental health, I wanted to give girls resources. If they don't have anyone that they can talk to, I wanted them to have resources so that they could learn more and keep themselves safe and healthy.
So I guess my question, because it's so hard. Like I'm looking at this and I feel like this book could have just gone on and on and on and on, because there's so much that we don't often get to talk about. So how does one decide what makes the cut?
Oh man, that was so hard. So the origins of the book. So
Yeah.
the origins of the book is you and I and our friend Dr. Dent were doing an intergenerational workshop in Indianapolis. And we were expecting about 12 Black girls. And so I thought it would just be neat if those girls left with a letter from a Black woman. And so I kind of offhandedly went on Facebook and made an ask. And what followed was not 12 letters, it was more than 50 letters from around the world that were so beautiful. Like, honestly, there was not a bad letter in the bunch, and they kept coming. And I realized that, it needed to be more than a moment, it needed to be a movement. And so many of the letters needed to be seen by more than just one girl. Like, your letter needs to be seen by lots of Black girls who are learning how to love their skin. And so I thought a book was the best way to do that. So, but a lot of the letters that I got were kind of general advice, inspiration, and I didn't want that to be all of the book. Like I said, I wanted to cover some other topics like, how do you choose a good friend? And how do you prepare for your work life? And, how do you deal with a hard relationship with your dad or your mom? Or what if you're adopted? And what do you do with your biracial identity or your queer identity? And so there were some letters that I actually solicited from people. I had lists of topics I wanted to cover, and I got people to write on specifically those topics. And it was hard. But any letter that didn't make the cut, I still will attempt to give it to a Black girl.
And that was going to be my next
Yeah.
question is, are you still soliciting letters? And I don't want to take up too much time because I need to hear more from the book, but are you still soliciting letters? And is there any topic, or are you just at a point where whatever's on your heart to write, please write it?
Exactly. Yes, I will still accept letters. And as a matter of fact, if you go to my website, tamarawinfreyharris.com, there's a page where you can submit letters. You can either, mail them, because some people have put it on beautiful stationery and all of that, or you can just email it. And I still make an effort as I can to get those letters to Black girls. And you can write on any topic. But there are tips on that page on how to write a good letter. And it just repeats some of the things I said about, not making assumptions about class and religion and sexuality and some things like that.
So if you had to choose something to read, because I've read my letter and I know you didn't write one, what would you read? And will you read whatever that is?
I will tell you what I will read. I will read the epilogue of the book because that kind of summed up. So my version of the letters, I wrote an introduction, a preface, an epilogue, and an intro to each chapter that kind of set the stage and provided context for the message that I wanted Black girls to take away. And my letter to Black girls is kind of the epilogue to the book, which the title is Pick Up Your Oyster Knife. And I hope you recognize that Zora Neale Hurston reference. It says, I love you, Black girl. I love Black girls in Afro puffs and Black girls in bundles of Remy. I love the daddy's girls and the fatherless ones. I love the little sisters who make straight A's and the ones who skip school. I love the hood girls and the suburban girls and the country girls too. I love the quiet girls and the loud girls, the lip smacking, smart talking ones. I love the saved girls and the heathens. I love the girls who stay in sweatshirts and J's and the ones in tight Fashion Nova fits. I love the happy girls and the anxious girls and the girls battling depression. I love the trans girls living defiantly. I love the girls in the library and the ones on the basketball court. I love the virgins and young mamas. I love the girly girls and the butch girls. I love the girls who fight. I love the girls who love boys and the girls who love girls and the girls who love both or neither. I love you, Black girl, unconditionally. And whether you are 15 or 50, you hear me today. I love you whether you look or act like they say you should. You are not wrong. When you are wrong, I love you with all your flaws. No matter what choices and mistakes you have made, no matter where you live, no matter what you look like, no matter what thing has happened to you. And the greatest thing you can learn is to love yourself unconditionally too. It may be the hardest thing you have to learn, and I hope the letters in this book have shown you how. One other thing, Black girl, you must learn to love other Black women and girls the same way. Love us whether we look or act like they say we should. We are not wrong. We are wrong. Love us with all our flaws. No matter what choices and mistakes we have made, no matter where we live, no matter what we look like, no matter what thing has happened to us. Now, this doesn't mean you have to become a target for another Black girl's pain or anger or trauma. Doesn't mean you have to silence yourself in the face of Black women. It means you must give your sisters grace and understanding, the benefit of the doubt. So few people give us that. We owe it to each other. We have to acknowledge each other's humanity, even maybe especially when we are walking away. I hope the letters in this book have shown you how to do that too. Because we are sisters, Black girl. We have to take care of ourselves and each other. You are me, I am you, and we are all right. Inside each of us are tiny pieces of our foremothers. Sarah Boone's ingenuity, Danielle Luna's unforgettable beauty, Toni Morrison's incomparable wisdom, Mamie Till's fierce love, Aretha Franklin's creativity, Marsha P. Johnson's fearlessness, Harriet Tubman's will to survive, Katherine Johnson's genius, Michelle Obama's grace. Black girls are made up of all that magic, birthed in the African sun, baptized by the Middle Passage, and burnished by America. That is a power that no one else can claim, just us. We are sisters. You are me. I am you. And we will get free together. Zora Neale Hurston, a great Black woman writer, once said, "I do not weep at the world. I am too busy sharpening my oyster knife." An oyster knife is a utensil used to crack open the shell of an oyster to get the tasty meat inside. Zora meant that she wasn't wasting time thinking about the hard parts of being Black and a woman, and she didn't care what other people said about her. She was busy trying to get at all the good stuff life had to offer. Celebrate your Black girl life. Celebrate us. Be like Zora and get that oyster girl. Thank you.
I love the fact that it sounds like a call to action. I love the fact that it really is like one of the most eloquent do yous that I've ever heard.
Oh, thank you.
And I could sit here and monopolize the rest of your time, but there are people here that probably have questions. So I am going to shut up now because yeah.
I believe it's question time.
Yeah, I believe so.
Wonderful. Thank you both of you so much for both reading those letters and for sharing your thoughts and letting us get to know you a little bit tonight. And while we're kind of waiting for people to share some of their questions, I really wanted to make sure that we could highlight especially some features about the book. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the know this sections that are kind of periodically throughout the book. And I appreciate how that reflects your intention around not making any assumptions about the identities or experiences of the readers. And I think that shows it so clearly. And then I'm wondering more broadly, if you could tell us a little bit about kind of the structure and format of the book as a whole.
So I kind of wanted it to have, like, I wanted it to begin and end, not saying that the letters in the middle aren't positive, but I wanted to make sure the letter began inspiring, making girls feel good about who they are and their identity, and ended on an inspiring note too. And in the middle, we dig into some hard stuff. Like, there's good stuff in there too, but I wanted it to kind of have an arc, so that, you know, girls walked away feeling loved. Like, that's the big thing. I want them to walk away feeling loved.
That's wonderful. Yes, I think that that is definitely the impression that I was left with looking through this book.
I think for me, I loved and just sometimes seen, like just not even getting to the point of love, but being in a school, I see some girls that just feel invisible to where you have to work up to feeling love. Like love is the ultimate goal, but they're at a point where I just want somebody to notice I'm in the room. So I think that, like I said, I want girls to feel loved, but I also, there are some girls out there that right at this moment, I'll take you seeing me see you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Absolutely. That actually really relates to a question from the audience. Can you talk about body image and Black girls and women? I see my granddaughter having the same insecurities I had as a girl, and it breaks my heart.
And I feel like it's even harder because, all women are faced now with these pneumatic, surgically enhanced bodies that have come to be thought of as normal. I talked to a group of high school girls and they talked about how all the guys, were asking them, why can't you have a body like Nicki Minaj? Why can't you have a body like X famous person?
Because
And
they
they're
rich
like,
and I'm not.
right, they're like, but their body, and the girls were like, but their bodies aren't even real. Like they've been surgically enhanced. And so there's this, and then, you have Instagram and you have my cat is trying to steal my pen. And then you have like all the face tuning and all the, like, there's this totally twisted view of what girls and young women are supposed to look like. And I saw that question and it made me think of one of the letters. It starts on page 23. And it's written by Erica Nicole Kendall, who for a long time has been on the internet and giving advice about sort of health and fitness to Black women. But she says in her letter, and I think this really awesome, also know that valuing your body for what it can do gives you a different kind of drive. Skills are meant to be built. Train, push yourself, and give yourself the chance to grow. Skills are meant to build character just as much as they're meant to build ability. You are soft and your humanity must always be recognized. But building resilience means you know what it looks like and feels like to get back up when you're down. You had to fall off that wall a few times before you even got halfway. Getting back up after getting knocked down is a skill set that extends beyond training too. Do not let the world tell you the only important thing or even the most important thing about your body is what it looks like. It is an essential part of self-care to not only know how to move your body, but know that this movement is the best kind of care for your body. So her letter is all about appreciating your body for what it can do. If it can help you race to the corner to grab your little sister before she rides out into the street, if you can only get 2 steps up the wall, in gym class, it's okay. It's a thing you can do and your feet move you along, and be happy with that. I'm on my husband snuck up behind me. I was like, oh my God, what is it?
It's not the cat.
So you should have just blamed the cat.
Yeah, we couldn't tell with your background. That was something that I was wondering about a little bit because this book is such a balm and it's centered around these affirmations. And I know from reading a little bit about you, Tamara, is that you also have some background in wellness and in yoga. So I was wondering if you could, what some of your thoughts were about cultivating wellness for ourselves, but also cultivating wellness in community and with regards to social justice and racial justice as well.
I think, I hope everyone follows the NAP ministry. They are absolutely fantastic. Follows her on Twitter and other platforms. I think rest is so important, and it's very, very important for Black women and Black girls. Very often, we've been fed this stereotype, the strong Black woman stereotype, that some people find inspiring, but very often, sometimes becomes like a hammer that keeps us from resting when we should be resting, and makes us forget that we are soft and we are vulnerable and we do need to sit down sometimes. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to become a trained yoga teacher, is so that I could bring some of those, healing tools, the breath work and the body movement and the meditation to my sisters in a setting that feels comfortable to them, because a lot of yoga spaces, as much as they preach inclusiveness and we are the world, are not welcoming to Black and brown bodies, and aren't welcoming to disabled bodies and older bodies and larger bodies. So I wanted to do it in a way that was more inclusive.
So thanks for telling us about that. I was also really moved. I know you mentioned it in the program today, but really moved by your description of all of the letters coming in. And so I'm wondering if there was a letter that was most surprising to you, or more broadly, if there was a part of kind of writing and compiling this book that was surprising to you.
The letter that changed everything is actually in the book. It was a letter by a woman named Nicole Jackson. And it was actually the first book that I got. And it is so beautiful, so, so beautiful, that I was like, it made me cry. I couldn't believe that a woman had been so vulnerable. And this wasn't a woman that I knew. Like some letters that came in, the first letters came from women that I knew and had relationships with. This is a woman I didn't know at all. So this took courage. And she talks about, she had a very difficult childhood. She had two brilliant Ivy League parents, but there were mental health issues. There were addiction issues. Both her parents wound up infected with HIV. There was poverty. She dropped out of high school. Today, she is working toward her doctorate, and has a wonderful career in STEM. But that's not the part that's not the part that really warmed my heart. It was the way that she talked to girls and talked about the world, that she wants to make for girls. And I'll just read the end of her letter. "We should have been pen pals a long time ago. I'm sure there would have been much to discuss, but know that you were there with me. Know that you are here with me. Know that you will be there for every keynote address at every given tech conference. You will be there for every new concept or application I create, for every new breakthrough, every algorithm, every data model created. You will be on my mind as I research while pursuing my doctorate to understand how you think and learn, so someday someone can teach your children better than others have taught you. Know that you are not alone. You are not invisible. I see you. You are capable. You are powerful. You are worthy. You are part of a larger community, and with us, you are home. As Black women, we are not the exception, we are the norm, and I will wait for you. We will wait for you. I will build an infrastructure for you and keep the path lit on your journey, so you'll never have to worry about finding your way again. In moments when life seems most uncertain and you are most afraid of your future, think of the caterpillar who did not know that when it saw a butterfly flying above, it too would become one. You are a part of something bigger, so accept the uneasiness in your gut when you desire more and trust it, and then rise to your own occasion, and you will be met with equal company. Nicole."
Wow.
I was like, I read it and I was like, I needed that. It's
Yeah.
so beautiful. I love the part about, like, I will build an infrastructure, because it says I am proactively going to make this world better for you, and I want you to know that.
You know what it's always put me in the mindset of is how in those old timey movies when you would see the gentleman take the coat and put it over the puddle, but that was never happening for Black girls. That was never happening for Black women. I would even go as so far as to say that had there been a Black woman standing there, he'd have took the Black girl and put her down for the white woman to walk over in the puddle. And so just that that we will build an infrastructure part says unequivocally that someone is doing something for you, and that's specifically for you. And as Black girls, we don't get a lot of that because we are in a society that was not built for us. We're in school systems that were not built for us. We're being defined by a definition of womanhood that damn sure wasn't built for us. So that piece around the infrastructure is saying on another level that here's something that's for you, not something that you have to bend to fit you, not a square peg that you have to make fit in a round hole, but here is something for you. And I'm gonna shut up now because I said that earlier.
And I think it also says, I see what is happening to you. I think I was very lucky to get an endorsement from Tarana Burke on the book. And I think sometimes about what she says about, you know, how the idea for Me Too was formed. You know, there was a 13-year-old girl who talked to her about being sexually assaulted, and she wondered later why she hadn't told that girl Me Too. And I think we don't say that enough to Black girls in a lot of different areas in addition to sexual assault. And so some of these letters are like saying, I see what's happening, and me too. Me too, I've felt bad about my skin. Me too, I've been sexually assaulted. Me too, I've felt unsure about a lot, just sharing that we have common experience.
There is so much community and solidarity in this book. It feels like there are other, it feels like there is connections happening in the pages themselves. It's beautiful. And we have just a few minutes left, so I wanted to make sure that we have a little bit of time and space for you to share anything about either your other kind of collaborations, your organization that you have together, or about future writing and future projects that you want to share.
So I will share about my next book, and then maybe Carolyn will share about Centering Sisters.
I got you.
So the second expanded edition of my first book, The Sisters Are All Right, will be out in October of this year. With, so much has happened since I first wrote that book in 2016 to women, to Black women. It's got a lot of expanded interviews. So the book is about negative stereotypes of Black women, where they came from, how they followed us over centuries. And then there are interviews with more than 100 Black women from across the country on what our lives are really like. And so in this expanded edition, I've added a chapter on power. And so I talk about women's role in all of the social justice activism that's happened over the last few years. The fact that we have a Black biracial woman in the White House, Stacey Abrams, all her work in politics. And I also interview lots of women about other things like beauty and sex and motherhood and all of that good stuff. And it'll be out in October this year.
I didn't realize it was October. Did I miss that? It's very possible I missed that. There's been a lot going on. Centering Sisters. Well, Centering Sisters, as we've already stated, will be designed to be an inclusive space for Black women, girls, and femmes, so that there are these safe spaces to have these conversations. We do a podcast twice a month. I don't know if that is bi-monthly or is that bi-weekly. I don't know, but it's 2 times every month.
Right.
I always get those two confused, but it's twice a month. And our next topic, I believe, is Black girls and mental health. And so we will have panelists coming on to discuss that issue. And every show, we try to have someone come on and have a conversation about things that are specifically meeting the needs of our target demographic.
That's wonderful. Thank you for telling us about that. And Tamara, thank you for telling us about the expanded edition of your other book. And I did want to say, this is just a throwing it out there. I have been, and so this has been focused on young adults and adults in your books. But since we are a children's bookstore, I have been so excited seeing especially in really young kids, like the picture books and board books, Ibram X. Kendi's Anti-Racist Baby and Stamped for Young Readers. So I'm just throwing it out there that if you ever had a dream to write like a picture book, nonfiction, and use your voice for those younger readers, I think that would absolutely have an audience.
Ooh, that's a good idea. But here's a picture book recommendation. Hopefully you can see this. I don't know whether you have it in your store, but it's That They Lived. It's written by my dear friend, Rochelle Riley, African Americans Who Changed the World. And she worked with Christy Smith Jones. You may have seen these pictures a few years ago. There's a woman who's a photographer who dressed her daughter up as all these historic figures like Katherine Johnson and Coretta Scott King. And so she and Rochelle worked together. It's just so cute. I can't tell you.
I've got to get that.
And she captured so there are these great stories written about these people and written about them when they were children. So, there's a picture of her grandson dressed up as Thurgood Marshall. You probably can't see that, but then the copy about Thurgood talks about what was happening when he was 14 and other stories about what were happening when these kids were 8. And it shows
I will have to get that for the
greatness begins early. So that's my other book
cute.
recommendation.
I'm glad you had that readily available. And one of my colleagues just found the book on our website. So we have a link to That They Lived in the chat if that piqued your interest too.
Oh, cool.
Support Wild Rumpus, support local independent bookstores.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Get both of those books today.
Yes, absolutely. And I really have to say, I highly encourage, if you're in the audience, that you get your own copy of Dear Black Girl. It's so well done. And thank you both so much for being here with us tonight.
If you watch this and you buy my book from Wild Rumpus, if you tweet me or social media me a picture of your Wild Rumpus receipt, I will send you a signed book plate, and then you will have a signed book.
You know what? Since we're talking about children, if you tweet her, let me see what I got over here.
So many reasons to buy these books from Wild Rumpus. I'll send
you a copy of my 6-year-old's book.
It is so good.
Buddha and Granny Don't Like the Rona. Well, she's not 6 yet. She will be 6 on Tuesday. And she wrote this book to help her process everything that was going on with coronavirus and how it made her feel that she could not see. You see that meditation, her favorite yogi, Tammy? And how it made her feel about not being able to see her grandmother. So let me know who tweets you, and I will drop a copy of Buddha and Granny Don't Like the Rona. I will even get Ever to sign it. Well, write her name.
All you got to do is buy the book from Wild Rumpus.
There you go. And they will get also a copy of Buddha and Granny Don't Like the Rona.
That is so precious. What a gorgeous book. I love that. Processing our feelings. Thank you both so much for taking the time to share some of your experience and read the letters with us tonight. we felt really, really lucky to have you as guests. And we did have people asking in the audience. We will have the recording available on our YouTube. And let's all make sure to connect on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram. We would love to hear from you all again. So thank you. I hope you both have a great night. Thanks everyone for coming.
Night. Bye-bye.